a Zoomer take back my privacy? Or what is out there permanently lost? Like, how do we balance our privacy and the use of consumer devices? What can I do to protect myself other than giving up all technology, which really isn't practical in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, this is the central question. So again, when we look back at this structurally, systemically, what is wrong? All these records about you are out there, held by other people. Now, the information is about you, but it's owned by everybody and controlled by everybody but you. How can it be that the phone company has a record of everywhere you've ever been, every phone call that you have ever made, because you're young enough to be within, that 1987 that AT&T is holding call records going back to, for example. How can it be that they have it, they control it, and you have no say over it?
Currently, employers are allowed to secretly monitor employees, as no federal law exists that requires them to inform their workers about surveillance.
This is a failure of U.S. law. The U.S. is basically unique in developed democracies in that we have no basic privacy law. We have only the Fourth Amendment, which only binds the government, state and federal, primarily federal, in certain cases state. Corporations are basically free to do whatever they want.
Some employers are turning to software to monitor what their employees are doing all day long. The technology does things like take screen grabs or monitor how long they're active on their computer.
In the EU, we see efforts like the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, where they're trying to start to regulate these activities. But they still haven't recognized the prime problem. They see it as a data protection problem. They think it was not a consensual exchange, but if they just put a cookie warning up on a site or say the site can't do it this way or that way, all the data they collect is okay as long as they protect it, they say what uses they're for, they not sell it onwards or these other things. But we don't have a data protection problem. We have a data collection problem. The problem is that too many people can collect too much about too great a population.
Software companies say it allows employers to see how productive their employees have been. So Nick, explain exactly how this technology works.
The basic idea is that your employer has access to understanding what you do on your computer. It can be through your webcam. There's some systems that allow the employer to watch you at any moment. And there's some that constantly photograph your screen, like every 5 seconds, and can almost create a rolling video of what you're doing at every point. So they can see every single thing you type in, and at the end of the day, your boss or somebody in the human resources department can see all the things you type.
And then it's theirs. This is an artifact of failing in U.S. law. It's actually a Supreme Court case called Smith versus Maryland. It's a 1970s vintage court case that's basically about threatening phone calls made to some woman. And this woman had a suspicion that she knew who the person was, because after one of these, breathy phone calls or whatever, she saw some creeper driving real slowly past her house. And so she wrote down her plate number. She calls the police. She says, "Can you look into this guy? Is he the one who made these phone calls?" The cops could have gone and gotten a warrant and gotten those records, but they didn't. They figure we'll just go to the phone company, we'll just ask them to share the records, and we'll see. Plate number's either the guy or it's not. Open and shut case, right? It was the guy, right? Creeper's gonna creep. Now, his defense attorney said this was a violation of the Fourth Amendment and everything like that. He had a privacy interest in these records. They could not be expected to have been known, and the cops needed a warrant to get it. And they should have needed a warrant to get it. But the courts knew the guy was a creeper, right? And so they were reluctant to just let him walk. And at the same time, the cops had a reasonable suspicion that it might be this guy. And they weren't getting the records from the guy. They were getting the records from the phone companies. And so the way the courts threaded this needle is they went, well, they were the phone company's property. And you could decide to do whatever you want with your own property. So if they decided voluntarily to give this information to the cops, Cops didn't need a warrant. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually agreed because it's the 1970s. It's one creeper making a threatening phone call. Well, the government of the United States and most governments around the world took this principle called the third party doctrine and made it the global standard. Basically, they went, well, records about someone held by a third party are not the property of the person the records are about. They're the property of the third party, so they can do whatever they want.
We take a number of data points, be it a CRM tool that they're currently using, a phone system like a Vonage, an email system. We aggregate all those data points in a real-time proprietary dashboard. We record and transcribe all your phone calls. All of it is recorded. We use AI tools to massage that into a real-time score that you see, as does your boss and the CEO and the VP of sales and the chief revenue officer. Everyone is seeing the productivity.
This made sense in the 1970s. It does not make sense when everyone everywhere can make records about every person that is not them easily, cheaply, automatically, and basically use it in increasingly harmful and toxic ways. I think we will see this doctrine revisited within your lifetimes, at least. The reality is right now, nobody wants to deal with this because they want the legislature to act. The courts go, look, this is standing, it's settled law. If you guys have a problem with it, you should just pass a law. And they could. Congress could change the law tomorrow.
It's now a free-for-all. It's a wild, wild west. Everybody is now subject to the same kind of minute monitoring as we previously thought was the plight of those poor factory or warehouse workers.
But they're all getting their pockets stuffed with lobbying money from Google and Facebook and all the rest. Everybody who has money in the country is benefiting from the status quo of this exploitative, abusive system. It is the people who are exploited by this system who want it to change. And unfortunately, privacy and the abuses of it are largely invisible.
We increasingly find that employees are willing to forego some of their privacy in exchange for jobs, particularly in the current economy.
Every morning you come to your desk, you have an email from us. You have your productivity score, your proto scores on the first line of the email. Your score yesterday for proto score was 74. Your colleagues were 90. They've done more.
I mean, think about it. Even if you care about privacy, you don't see the abuse when it happens, as the questioner asked. Are these records just out there? What can I do? Well, you don't own them. They're pre-existing now. Even if you became an absolute, super CIA ghost, went off the grid, lived in the woods, everything from your prior life to that date is still out there. They know what you like to read. They know what you like to eat. They could try to make inferences if you ever come back on the grid, even with a completely different identity, because they know there's only one guy in, this backwoods part of Iowa who wears these kind of shoes and drinks this kind of coffee and, blah, blah, blah. Is that right? It's not right. We know that's right. The thing is, there is no enforced ephemerality of records. By ephemeral, the property of an ephemeral thing is something that disappears over time. It's like a rain the next day, it evaporates off.
There obviously has been a huge upsurge in the use of this software while everybody has gone to work at home. And some of that will stay even when we return to work. We're going to have a whole different kind of surveillance added on top of the work from home surveillance that we've gotten in the last couple months.
Today, people can create these records and basically hold them for as long as they want. So as data storage capability increases, they hold records for longer and longer periods of time, which represent increasingly greater slices of our lives. Now, particularly when we get to things like the rights of children, a kid born today who is subject to all of these systems, they talk to Alexa too. They say, okay, Google. They don't even know what Google is. They think Google is just the thing that gives them answers, right? But it is recording these interactions. It is padding out their new permanent record. How can it be that we can say they consented to this? They can't enter into any other kind of contract, right? They're below the legal age of majority. And so I think as we look at these things in a more reasoned way, we'll recognize businesses should only be permitted by law to hold records for the basically minimum necessary period to process that transaction, right? Like, for example, let's say you buy something with a credit card. Well, the credit card company needs to know that you bought it and you paid for it with this card and it was ordered to this address and everything like that, at least until the order has been delivered and the chargeback period has elapsed. Because what if you say, you know, it didn't arrive or whatever, or it was broken, and the manufacturer that I bought it from, you know, they won't refund me, so I want you to reverse that transaction. They need to know the transaction happened, have all these records. But what about after that? Well, right now, financial services companies track every purchase that you ever made, and they pad this out because they can use this to sell in Target and all kinds of other things. Stock market, for example, it sells the order flow of its customers, every brokerage, right? They go, these many people are buying this stock and these people are buying this stock, and they sell it onwards. And that's a major profit center for them. They do it as it's happening. But they also have the historical volumes, things like that. How long should these things be allowed to be held for in every different instance? For medical information, right? You may want to create an exceptional consent where you go, I want my doctor to have my lifelong medical information, right? But you don't want Amazon to have your lifelong purchase information. Why should they have that, right? Maybe you want them to have, you know, a year. Maybe you want them to have a month. Maybe you don't want them to have anything. Is there any reason by law that we shouldn't be able to dial this on or off? No. Right now, you know, companies would lobby against it. They go, oh, it's innovation. You know, we want to provide people choice. Man, there's nobody out there who wants Jeff Bezos to know, you know, what kind of underwear they buy 10 years later. But that is the status quo of law today. What can you do to change it? There's technical countermeasures, right? You can look at privacy guides online, and you should. There's the Surveillance Self-Defense Guide by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. There's privacytools.io, which is a pretty good up-to-date guide where they're just telling you, you know, what's a VPN, how to use it, these kind of things, how to harden your browser and all that. But you don't want to get in an arms race with the richest companies in the world and the most powerful governments in human history. Right? That's not fair to you, it's not fair to your community, and it's not fair to the future. The way we fix this is to say, it is a problem, I care about this, and go, it has to change. The politics around this issue have to change. The law around this issue has to change. And the penalties for the people out there who are abusing us at scale have to change. Because right now it's costless for them, and in fact, makes them rich.